He was one of the richest men in Atlanta. He had everything money could buy, the penthouse, the power, the success. But every single night, he went to bed completely alone because everyone around him loved what he had, not who he was. So he did something that would change everything. He gave 3 women the same credit card. No limit, no rules. 3 days. His girlfriend spent $90,000. His assistant used it to steal his connections. But his housekeeper, she spent less than $100. And what she chose to do with it? Quietly, with no cameras and no audience, broke this billionaire wide open and gave him something no amount of money had ever been able to buy. You know, there are some people in this world who have more money than they could ever spend in a lifetime. Big houses, fancy cars, the kind of success that makes strangers stop and stare. From the outside, everything looks perfect. But if you could peek behind those closed doors, past the marble floors and the floor-to-ceiling windows, sometimes you find a man sitting completely alone, wondering why, with all he has, he still feels so empty inside. That was Nathan Cole. Nathan was a self-made billionaire from Atlanta, Georgia. He'd built his company, Cole Technologies, from nothing, just a laptop, a dream, and more sleepless nights than he could count. By the time he was 42, Forbes had his face on the cover. Politicians knew his name. Business schools used his story in their classes. But Nathan sat in his penthouse every morning drinking black coffee, watching the city wake up below him, and feeling like the loneliest man alive. He had 3 women in his life, 3 women who were close to him in very different ways. First, there was Vanessa, his girlfriend. Beautiful, bold, always dressed like she was walking into a photo shoot. She traveled with him, hung on his arm at every event, and posted their life together on social media with perfect lighting and perfect captions. But Nathan had begun to notice something. When the gifts came, she was warm and affectionate. When they slowed down, so did she. Her love seemed to follow the money, like a shadow follows the sun. Then there was Claire, his personal assistant. Sharp, ambitious, always 10 steps ahead. She managed his entire world, his calendar, his calls, his reputation. She was brilliant, no question about it. But one night at a work event, Nathan overheard her whispering to a colleague. "I've been beside this man for 5 years," she said. "One day, I'm going to be more than just his assistant." Nathan had never forgotten those words. They sat in the back of his mind like a splinter he couldn't quite reach. And finally, there was Rosa, his housekeeper. Quiet, steady, and kind. She was always there, always working, always invisible in the way that truly good people sometimes are. Rosa never asked for anything beyond her paycheck. She came in early, left late, and treated every room in that penthouse like it was her own home. Once, Nathan had overheard her on the phone, voice low and strained, talking about her sick neighbor and the medical bills piling up. He'd offered to help pay. She'd refused. "It's not your burden, Mr. Cole," she said. "I'll figure out." Who says that? Who turns down help when they desperately need it? Nathan couldn't stop thinking about it. He couldn't stop thinking about all 3 of them, who they were when they thought he wasn't paying attention. And that's when the idea came to him. Not out of cruelty or suspicion, but out of a deep, aching need to know the truth. He was tired of being surrounded by performances. He was tired of not knowing who actually saw him, the man, and not just the empire he'd built. He sat at his desk late one night and wrote 3 names on a notepad. Vanessa, Claire, Rosa. Then he picked up the phone and made a quiet call to his head of security. "I need you to do something for me," he said, "and I need it kept between us." The next day, he prepared 3 envelopes. Inside each one was a black credit card, no limit, 3 days, no rules. Spend it however you want. He was done guessing. He was about to find out exactly who these women were. Nathan gave Vanessa her envelope first. She was standing by the helipad of his building when he handed it to her, fresh off a flight back from Miami, sunglasses on, bags in hand. She opened it, looked at the card, and let out a shriek that echoed off the building walls. "Are you serious?" she said, grabbing his face with both hands and kissing him on the cheek. "Oh my God, babe. I know exactly what I'm doing with this. You are the best. You are literally the best person alive." She didn't ask why. She didn't ask what it was for. She was already on her phone before her SUV had pulled away. Nathan stood on the helipad and watched the car disappear into Atlanta traffic. Something in his chest felt tight. He gave Claire hers a few hours later in his office. She looked at the envelope carefully, the way she looked at everything, with calculation. Then she smiled, slow and professional. "That's very generous of you, Nathan," she said. "You didn't have to do this." "Consider it a thank you," he told her. She nodded, picked up her phone, and walked out. By that evening, his security team reported she had already booked a luxury suite downtown and scheduled 3 networking meetings with executives from rival companies. People Nathan had never introduced her to. She had introduced herself as Nathan Cole's right hand, the person who keeps the whole operation running. Nathan stared at that report for a long time. And then there was Rosa. He left the envelope on the kitchen counter before she arrived for her morning shift, with a handwritten note that said, "This is for you, Rosa. No strings attached. Spend it however you like. You've earned it." And when Rosa found it, she didn't open it right away. She carried it around for 20 minutes before she finally knocked on the door of his study. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, holding the envelope like it might break. "I think this was left here by mistake." He looked up from his desk. "No mistake. It's yours." She frowned slightly. "Did I do something wrong?" He almost laughed. "Rosa, you've done everything right. I just want you to take a few days and do something good for yourself. Go live a little." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "All right. Thank you, Mr. Cole." And she walked away, still holding the envelope gently with both hands, like it was something she wasn't quite sure she deserved. Nathan's security team reported back to him every evening. The updates were short, but they hit him like punches to the chest. Vanessa, $91,000 in 3 days. Designer boutiques in Buckhead. A rented yacht for a private party on Lake Lanier. 50 guests, none of whom Nathan knew. Instagram stories with the hashtag blessed and spoiled. She hadn't called him once. Claire, curated, strategic, new wardrobe, a professional photo shoot, rooftop cocktail events with investors. She had told 3 separate people that she was Nathan's closest confidant and business partner. She posted on LinkedIn, "Success is about what rooms you walk into and who you bring with you." Rosa, she spent $94. She bought groceries from a corner store on her block. She paid 2 months of her neighbor's electric bill. She went to a small orphanage in East Atlanta, a rundown building with a peeling sign, and dropped off books, crayons, and bags of fruit. A photo from the security team showed her sitting cross-legged on a cracked linoleum floor with 4 children around her, reading aloud from a picture book. She hadn't even used 1% of the card. Nathan sat in his penthouse that night in the dark, untouched glass of bourbon on the table beside him. And he didn't move for a very long time, because what Rosa had just shown him wasn't strategy. It wasn't performance. It was character, raw, unpolished, and completely real. She hadn't known anyone was watching. She had just been herself. And that was the most powerful thing he had ever seen. Nathan called all 3 women to dinner 3 days later. The dining room was set beautifully. Crystal glasses, soft lighting, white linen. But the mood in the room was anything but beautiful. Vanessa arrived first, in a sequin dress, still glowing from her weekend. Claire came in next, composed and sharp, in a black blazer. Rosa was last, looking like she wasn't sure she should be there at all. She sat with her hands in her lap and barely touched her water. Nathan let the silence settle for a moment before he spoke. "I gave each of you a credit card 3 days ago," he said, his voice quiet and even. "I told you it was a gift. In a way it was, but it was also something else. I needed to understand who the people closest to me truly are, not what you tell me. What you show me when you think I'm not looking." The room went completely still. Vanessa's smile disappeared. "You tracked us. I observed your choices," he said simply. Vanessa pushed back from the table. "Nathan, you told me to enjoy myself. That's all I did. I don't see how that's wrong." "You spent $91,000 in 3 days," he said. "You laughed when your friend insulted a server at lunch. You didn't call me once. Not to say thank you. Not to check in. Not to invite me to the party you threw on a boat I paid for. You just performed your life for your followers and never once thought about anyone else. Her eyes went cold. You're incredible. You spy on me, and now I'm the bad person. I didn't spy on you, he said. You just showed me who you are. She stood up, grabbed her clutch, and walked out without another word. The sound of her heels on the marble floor echoed long after she was gone. Nathan turned to Claire. You were smarter about it, he said quietly. You didn't waste money, but you used what I gave you to get closer to people who could help you move on from me. You spent 5 years building a position beside me, and the first chance you got, you used it to open doors for yourself. I understand ambition, Claire, but you weren't building us. You were building your exit. Claire's jaw tightened. I have given you everything, Nathan. Late nights, impossible deadlines, cleaning up disasters you didn't even know were happening. Do I not deserve to think about my future? You deserve the world, he said. But you should have been honest with me instead of using my name as a stepping stone, without my knowledge. She stood slowly, buttoning her blazer with steady hands. I see what's happening here, she said, glancing at Rosa. I hope your little fairy tale works out. And then she walked out, too, quieter than Vanessa, but just as final. Nathan sat in the silence that followed. Then he turned to Rosa. She looked terrified. Am I being let go? She whispered. He shook his head gently. No, Rosa. I asked you here because I want to tell you something. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I saw what you did with the card, the groceries, the neighbor's electric bill, the orphanage, the children. He stopped. His voice had gone rough at the edges. You didn't know I was watching. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You just gave, because that's who you are. Rosa looked down at her hands. It didn't feel right to spend that money on myself when I knew people around me needed it more. That's exactly it, Nathan said softly. That's what I've been missing. Not someone who needs what I have. Someone who sees what the world needs and actually does something about it, even when no one is watching. Rosa looked up at him then, and for the first time in that long, empty mansion, the silence between two people didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like the very first breath of something real. Some love stories start with fireworks. This one started with a bowl of leftover soup. The week after that dinner, Nathan found Rose in the kitchen one evening, stirring a pot of something that smelled like everything warm and familiar he had somehow forgotten existed. She looked up when he walked in, a little startled, still not quite used to the fact that things between them had shifted. I made too much, she said quietly. You're welcome to have some if you like. He sat down at the kitchen island, not the formal dining room, just the kitchen, and she set a bowl in front of him, and they talked, not about business, not about money, about her mother, who had raised her alone in a small apartment in Savannah, Georgia, who used to say, Baby, kindness doesn't need a reason. It just needs a willing heart. About Nathan's parents, who had died when he was young, who he still missed every single day, even though he rarely said out loud. About how strange it is to build an empire and not have a single person to come home to inside it. They talked until midnight, and then they talked again the next evening. And the one after that. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow and careful and honest, the way real things grow. Nathan didn't sweep Rose off her feet with grand gestures. He sat beside her in the garden while she planted herbs and listened while she told him about the kids at the orphanage, learning all their names. He drove with her on Thursdays when she went to deliver groceries to elderly neighbors on her block. She, in turn, started sitting in on some of his foundation meetings. Not because he asked her to, but because she cared about where the money was going. And one day, Nathan realized something. For the first time in his adult life, he wasn't performing. He wasn't calculating. He wasn't wondering what someone wanted from him. He was just present, comfortable, seen. Rosa helped him transform 2 wings of his estate. One became a free learning center for kids in underserved neighborhoods, art supplies, tutoring, computers, books. The other was converted into temporary housing for women and families in crisis. Rosa designed every program herself, visited every family personally, and remembered every single name. She never wanted press release. She never wanted a gala in her honor. She just wanted the work to be done well and the people to feel dignified. Nathan watched her one Thursday afternoon at the orphanage, the same one she had visited with her credit card that first day. It had been painted fresh white now. There was a real playground in the yard, built by a crew Nathan had quietly funded. Rosa was sitting on the floor inside with a circle of children around her, telling a story with her hands moving like birds. One little girl had curled up and fallen asleep against her arm. Rosa was still talking, still smiling, gently patting the child's back without missing a beat. Nathan stood in the doorway and felt something break open in his chest. Not in a painful way. In the way a window breaks open on a spring morning, and suddenly the whole room breathes. They got married on a Saturday in October, in the garden of the estate, with no more than 50 people. Neighbors, staff, kids from the learning center, a few old friends. Rosa wore a simple ivory dress. Nathan cried. He didn't even try to stop himself. Years went by. The empire kept growing. The foundation expanded across 6 states. But the thing Nathan talked about most, the thing he told people when they asked what had changed him, was a business deal or a breakthrough. It was a bowl of soup in a kitchen. A woman who used a limitless credit card to buy groceries for strangers. A housekeeper who taught a billionaire what it means to actually live. Their daughter was born in the spring, a little girl with Rosa's brown eyes and Nathan's stubborn chin. Every night before bed, Rosa would sit beside her and tell her a story, not from a book, but from her heart. A story about a man who had everything and couldn't feel it. A story about a woman who had very little and shared every bit of it. A story about how sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is simply choosing to be kind when no one is watching. And just down the hallway, Nathan would stand quietly by the door and listen. He had spent years building things, companies, products, legacies. But a home filled with laughter, with purpose, with a love that had never once asked him what he was worth. This was the only thing he'd ever built that truly mattered. And if you're out there right now, feeling like no one sees you, feeling like the kindness you pour into the world goes unnoticed and unrewarded, I want you to hear this. It doesn't go unnoticed. Not always, and maybe not today. But a heart like Rosa's doesn't just change one man's life. It changes everything it touches. And that's the truest story I know.